Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RomaReads Publishing Podcast, where we interview people in the writing and publishing community to get a little bit of insight into this crazy, complicated industry and to hopefully make all our writing journeys just a little bit easier. I'm your host, Lauren Ilbury, and today we're actually interviewing no one. Not straight away, anyway. For this first episode, I thought I would explain a little bit about me and how RomaReads Publishing came about, which is the publishing company that I'm launching in March of 2024. Because the journey of RomaReads Publishing really opened my eyes into the nitty-gritty of the publishing industry. And I think some of the obstacles I've faced are obstacles that a few authors out there can relate to. I'll also be talking about the process a manuscript goes through when it's in the process of being published by a traditional publishing house. I'm hoping that by starting this podcast, we can figure out how to navigate this industry together, because there really isn't a whole lot of information out there. And really, it's only by asking questions that we're able to learn about just what the hell is going on. So this is Teacher's Pet, and it is a 570-page psychological thriller. The actual book took me the majority of quarantine and a little past that as well to write. It took me so long, I wondered if it would ever be finished. Even now, with everything set up, I almost don't believe it. But eventually it was completed. I have honestly lost count of the hours that I spent writing, rewriting, editing, and formatting. For somebody who can ramble on for about 570 pages long, I ironically really struggled to write the blurb on the back. I had no idea how to summarize it without giving away spoilers. It's like, imagine if somebody asked you your favorite movie, but you're not allowed to give away any plot points, and you're also only allowed 2 sentences to summarize it. Eventually, though, after much overthinking, I did settle on this. So in 1962, 4 teenagers commit a harmless prank on their teacher the day before summer holiday starts. But as hidden truths come to light, events take a sinister turn, and the teenagers are forced into making a decision that will haunt their lives forever. So it has honestly been just such a joy writing these characters, and in many ways, I'll be saying goodbye to a bunch of friends who never knew me. So the book itself does contain some very heavy topics and would definitely come with some trigger warnings. So I won't go too much into what the book contains or what the characters go through. But instead, I thought I would talk to you about how this book actually started up the idea for RomaReads Publishing. So I sent Teacher's Pet off to 1 or 2 agents, neither of which got back to me. Rejection is fine, but I think the waiting is unbearable. I would rather have a solid no than just weeks of waiting and ghosting. The publishers and their agents, obviously, they are incredibly busy people with no time to send a no to the thousands of manuscripts that get sent to them. And in those weeks of waiting, I got to thinking about the world of publishing and wondered if I should be waiting around for people to kickstart my career or whether I should just take the reins and do it myself. So as I looked more into the world of publishing, the more I just fell in love with the process of publishing a book. I am fascinated with how a group of people can take a manuscript and polish the words through various types of editing, how they can make a manuscript have a professional appearance through typesetting, how people can use limitless imagination with cover design, and how people can showcase that manuscript to the world through inventive marketing campaigns. I wanted to do that not only for myself, but for other people, to collaborate and workshop with authors, experience their passion for a project, and to bring this project to fruition. It became very clear early on that this publishing company was not about the money. I know it's a business, but you know, um, it was about creating a platform for authors to share their art, proudly watch them bring an idea into the world, see others become inspired by their message, and to hopefully use this message for good. I love seeing people's confidence, inspiration, and belief in an idea. And if I can help make that concept a reality, I knew it was something that went beyond a want to do. It was a need. As corny as it sounds, the more I've been in the process of setting up this company, the more I realized it was something that I was meant to do. Publishing just felt right in every sense of the word, and I have fully invested my blood, sweat, and tears into this startup. This is what RomaReads Publishing aims to do. So I spent months, if not a year or more, studying business. I have 2 business qualifications, but I strongly believe that you can study as much theory as you want, but when it comes to the practical, there's always going to be brand new hurdles. For example, the act of publishing itself. So what actually happens when a manuscript goes through a traditional publishing house? I do want to say that I can only offer information about a traditional publisher's point of view, not really a hybrid publisher's point of view. It might be different from them. And I also want to say that this is just what I've discovered through trial and error that I mentioned before. So if I have left anything out or misconstrued anything, I'm very sorry, and please do let me know, as it certainly isn't intentional. So I suppose we should start with the actual submission of your work. The big 6, Penguin, HarperCollins, Macmillan, etc., they require a literary agent. That's because they get sent so many manuscripts. If they were open to unsolicited submissions, it just wouldn't be possible to get through them all. Even with literary agents, they publish something like 70,000 books a year. Literary agents act as the middleman. They'll negotiate the contract for you, they'll keep you on track, and overall just be a good support for your writing career. In order to get a literary agent, you normally have to write a query letter and provide a sample of your writing. I only submitted to 2 literary agents before the idea of RomaReads Publishing came here, so I threw in the towel pretty quick. But I understand that people can submit to hundreds of literary agents before they're picked up. It's very competitive, and it's absolutely not personal. I can understand that it is disheartening, and that rejection or ghosting can feel like a judgment on your character or writing. But I think it's important to note just how many manuscripts they get sent through every single day. And a lot of deciding whether or not a manuscript gets picked up, that actually relies on a lot of external factors as well, beyond your control. You know, trends, historical, political, social, and economic factors all go into whether or not a book is picked up by a literary agent or publishing house. That being said, I do think there does need to be a rejection email if they're not interested, even if it's an automated one. I understand it's not as easy as that, but when you see how people are hanging on and how such hopes are pinned on the news, it's genuinely upsetting. So what if you decide to go without a literary agent? And I do want to say as well that I think there is a bit of a misconception that if you can't get a literary agent, then that's it, you're done. That's not the case. So if you decide to go without a literary agent, what do you do? Well, you have 3 options. Option 1, you can go the self-publishing route. Option 2, you can go to a smaller traditional publishing house that accepts unsolicited manuscripts. Or option 3, you can do the hybrid publishing route. I think in a later episode, if that's what people want, I'll do like a pros and cons about each route of publishing. But for argument's sake, let's just say you chose option 2. You went to a smaller traditional publishing house. And something I do want to clarify before going on is that, as mentioned before, this is just from the perspective of a smaller traditional publishing house. I put the stress on smaller because the bigger publishing houses will have all sorts of departments and networks going on, and their process may differ. And we've got to bear in mind that in the publishing process, while it does follow a general process, it may differ slightly from house to house anyway. So the explanation I'm about to give you will simultaneously be a very generalized overview of the publishing process, but will also be a deeper look into how we take a manuscript through publishing at RomaReads Publishing. So for that reason, I will use the term they rather than we. So you went to a smaller traditional publisher that accepts unsolicited manuscripts. You would normally send for a query, a synopsis of your work, and a sample of your work. Each traditional publisher is different in their requirements, so make sure you read up on what they require. If they like your work, they'll normally request a full manuscript for consideration. This process normally takes between 4 to 6 weeks per stage. They would then send you through a draft contract if all goes well. These are pretty standard, and I would recommend that you take it away, have a read through, get a literary lawyer to explain everything, ask what questions you need to, and then return it with any amendments that you want made, if there's any. The publishing house will then take that away, amend it, and return it for you to sign. A bit back and forth with contracts is a completely normal part of the process with publishing, so don't be afraid to ask questions. So when the contract is signed, the book begins the very first stage of editing, developmental editing. A developmental edit will look at the big picture of your manuscript and analyze how effectively you've used various elements of story writing. So plot, narrative, characterization, structure, style, so on and so forth. Here, we normally compile a big editorial letter where we'll give an overview / report / summary of your work and a line-by-line editing on the manuscript where we will highlight and suggest improvements where needed. And then this would be sent back to you to make the edits where necessary. Now, I can't speak for all publishing houses, but I have heard from authors before that they don't really see their manuscripts from the moment they submit it to the moment they see it on the shelves, and that their work is essentially edited or rewritten without their knowledge or permission, unless, of course, it's included in the contract. But this, that didn't seem fair to me. To me, that seemed almost disrespectful. I can understand in terms of timing and turnaround why it may just be easier to rewrite or edit manuscripts without waiting for the authors to do it, but it felt like the equivalent of going to an art gallery, taking your own set of paints, and then repainting over something that's already there without the artist's permission. So that's why when it comes to developmental editing, we prefer to send that back to the writer to edit. We don't send the manuscript back to the author when we move on to the second round of editing, which is the copy editing. So copy editing is generally what we think of when we think of editing. So this is grammar, spelling, word choice, style, consistency with things like names, for example, punctuation, so on and so forth. We would just generally take care of that for you because it doesn't really require any substantial structural changes. So when all that's done, it goes through the proofreading stage. So they just make sure that absolutely everything has been taken care of and that nothing's been missed. I say a lot, don't I? So we would then format the manuscript after this. So this is looking at margin sizes, fonts, line spacing, illustration, or photograph placing, if that's applicable, page sizes, and so on. We forward all of this then to our cover designer. The cover designer will generally take the manuscript through 4 to 5 rounds of designing. So after they've been briefed with an up-to-date synopsis and any other notes about any symbols, characters, or themes that may be relevant to the design process, they will then begin round 1. So round 1 is a very, very rough selection of thumbnail sketches. These sketches will be about 10-ish pictures that encapsulate the atmosphere of the book, but no work will be done with these pictures yet. Round 2 is where these thumbnail sketches will be narrowed down to about 5 or 6, and the first bit of work will begin, where the designer will start to put together a few elements for these chosen images to make them worthy of being a cover. Round 3 will be about 2 to 3, even more refined and worked on covers, and round 4 will be the final 2 covers to make a decision between. Round 5 is just a case of selecting the final front cover and then putting all the lovely details such as the ISBN, barcodes, and logos on the spine and the back cover. So as far as making the book goes, it's pretty much done, but it doesn't stop there. There is an absolute monster of a territory to navigate known as marketing. So the reason a lot of books take a long time to get published is because I am generalizing a bit here with that statement, but there is generally a very specifically timed marketing plan attached to each and every book. This personalized marketing plan can generally take between 6 to 9 months. So This is the part of the explanation that's going to get a bit crossed over. I'll tell you what we do at RomaReads Publishing, and then I will mention some other marketing materials that you can do if you're going down the self-publishing route. So about 6 months prior to publishing, we at the publishing house compile all the necessary information to give to our sales team and our distributor about the book. They'll then start to take this to chain bookshops, W.H. Smith, Barnes & Nobles, Waterstones, The Works, Foyles, independent bookshops, gift shops, museums, specialists, and non-specialist book outlets as well. And they'll start to pitch the book. 3 months prior to that, we begin to build a media campaign around the book. So this is both on social media, and this also includes journalists, magazines, newspapers. I don't know why I pronounce newspapers like that. Podcasts, local radios, TV, if applicable, blogs, so on and so forth for interviews and articles. We also then begin researching possible venues for PR book tours, if a book tour is something that we're going to do with you, and author signings. And we also begin to gather necessary materials like 3D promotional pictures to give out. This is just the research stage, because 1 month prior to publication, we begin printing the books. And the media campaign actually begins with all of the interviews and articles that were mentioned before. And then in the month after publication, that is when we aim to begin the book tours that was planned some months ago. So that's what we do. But now I thought I would mention some materials that you could use. I would recommend that timescale of about 6 months to build excitement around your book. But if you're an author who has written a book and then realized that you needed to do the marketing beforehand, it's not the end of the world. You know, you can still do marketing. It's just that when people tease the book beforehand and document the process, it has potential to build more excitement around the upcoming release. Doesn't mean you're never going to get sales if you don't do that. So here are some materials for marketing. Pick and choose what you want. Have a think about your budget, because some of these are obviously going to be very expensive, and really narrow down on the target market of your genre. So we have billboards, we have business cards, author websites, newsletters, newspaper ads, posters and banners, promotional items such as bags, mugs, bookmarks, etc., magazine ads, testimonials and reviews. I would recommend Book Siren for reviews, but of course ask friends and family as well. Approach book clubs, book review blogs, ask libraries if they'll do an author talk with you, book fairs, writers groups, booktubers, and your local independent bookshop as well. They normally love to support local authors. Then in terms of digital marketing, you have SEM, which is search engine marketing. I can't seem to speak today. Ironic on a podcast, but okay. So search engine marketing is where there are paid adverts that appear at the top of the SERP, which is the search engine results page. Do keyword research and see what works. So SEO is creating content in a way that search engines like Google will rank your page high on the SERP. And then there's social media marketing, which I'm sure you're already familiar with. But in case you're not, that involves creating a compelling social media marketing strategy and distributing your content. So have a think. I'm aware that it's not always possible to get a sales team and a distributor, especially as a self-published author. And even as a small publisher, the industry makes it insanely difficult for a small publisher to stand a chance. I was aware that I could only get so far as a publishing house without a sales team and a distributor, because book publishing and book selling are just two completely different markets. And in order to get our books into the chain bookstores, especially, I needed to make sure that our books are being sold through the sales channels that had already been established through the distributor and that sales team. So I was essentially stuck. I'm not saying it's impossible to get your books into chain bookstores, and I do think Barnes & Noble and Waterstones can accept self-published books on a case-by-case basis. There should be something on their website about that. But to distribute to all of these bookstores was just not possible for me to do by myself, because at the time of this recording, it is just me here and Roma the cat. So I approached sales team after sales team after sales team, and I was met with nothing. There were one or two who did reply to me and let me know that even though they are a sales team for publishers, they sort of required the publishing houses to be a little bit more bigger than me. And I can understand from a business perspective, they want to be confident with who they're representing and that they're not wasting their time. But I was so frustrated. How was I meant to grow as a publisher if I needed a sales team and a distributor to grow? But I needed to grow before I could get a sales team and a distributor. So I was just so stuck. I was hitting my head against a brick wall over and over and over again, metaphorically, of course. And then I found a sales team. And it sounds so easy. I was really gearing myself up for rejection. I hunted for hours for a sales team, and eventually I got through to one of their representatives who really, really kindly forwarded my message onto the main people in charge. He did also quite say that they were quite stretched at that time for taking new people on, so it might be a no. But that was fine. At least I could say that I had tried, and this was honestly the most communication that I had gotten from anybody. So I was really grateful that they were taking even that time. There was a meeting with a lovely bloke who then set up another meeting with the other person who was in charge, who informed me they would prefer to work through one of their established distributors. When they listed them off, like, my heart leapt, because one of their distributors was one of the ones who had gotten back to me, and it was tense. But eventually I got through after a few hours to the main person in charge at the distributor's place, and we organized a contract. So in the last meeting with the sales team, I just want to say, I know I am going on a little bit here. I could really go on for hours about how each stage of the publishing company was just, it was fine. It's all turned out well, but it was tough getting started. But I'm just giving you an example of just one of these elements that was really difficult to navigate. So in the last meeting with the sales team, I told them about our established distributor now, and I answered some questions that they had about titles, authors, marketing, so on. I could tell it was really on a knife's edge about whether or not they sort of like took me on. But eventually they said that we don't normally take on publishers your size, but we're going to take a leap of faith. And I felt nothing. I was in so much shock. I had been so stressed about this for ages because I had years at this point, years of research and planning into this publishing company. And finding a sales team was one of the final hurdles. I was happy, don't get me wrong, but I was just so completely shocked. You know, it almost gets me like emotional, like thinking about it, because I was just on my own for so long. I think for me, I was just Googling so much because that was pretty much all I could do. I didn't know anyone in the publishing sector, and no publishing house was going to give me a how to start up your own publishing company list to a competitor. So to get to where I am today was a lot of trial and error. Trial and error that I've overcome and I've learned from, and I am thoroughly prepared for the future if it ever happens again. I strongly believe that even if I get no further, I can still be really proud of myself for overcoming everything that I've overcome to get here. And I think that learning what I've learned has confirmed to me that when I encounter any new problems in the future, I have the determination, stubbornness, to find a solution. Because every problem has a solution. Sometimes the solution is obvious, sometimes it's not. There is a solution, and it is up to you to discover it. And I don't think it's something that we should have to do alone. I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's fair. I have a rather pessimistic theory as to why there isn't a whole lot of information out there for authors and publishers. And I don't have any evidence to back this up on. So I'm not going to say. But what I can say is that this lack of information is something that a lot of authors have been struggling with. And I don't think it's just me not doing the right Google searches. I mean, it could be, to be fair, but from my understanding, is something that a lot of authors struggle with, finding that information. Without naming names, I was talking to I was talking to this author who was involved in the publishing industry, used to work in the publishing industry, and now is left the publishing industry to just focus on writing books. And they said that, they still don't know all the answers when it comes to publishing. And I just remember thinking, like, so it's not just us, it's not just it's not just the case of we're not doing the right Google searches. Even people working in publishing don't always know what's going on. And that is a problem, because when we don't have that information to make the right decisions and to move forward confidently, it leads to a very unsafe environment. I do have notes. I've gone off on a ramble. RomaReads Publishing is a place where authors, regardless of whether or not people publish through us, can come and ask questions about writing or publishing. Like, shoot me a message, shoot me an email. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. Information about writing and publishing should not be as gatekept as it is. Authors are left to just blindly navigate this industry, and that leads to a lot of, as mentioned before, unsafe environments where authors are taken advantage of left, right, and center by scammers, by tricky fine print, and by plagiarizers. Because what information is out there to help us and let us know what the subtle red flags are? So how do we learn and begin to make this industry a safer place for one another? We support one another with constructive criticism, and we protect one another when we recognize red flags. We see each other's perspectives, and we understand the logistical path each other take, to then take those lessons to better our lives and the lives of other people. That is the aim that I have for this podcast, and that is the aim that I have for RomaReads Publishing. So that is it for the very first episode of the RomaReads Publishing Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time. And I will see you next week for our very first interview. Ta-ta.